I'm going to block in as much as possible without doing too much detail to start with. I'm going to use a large brush. Again, remember that you do not want to leave acrylic on your brush without washing it off or putting it into the water, because it'll harden and your brush will be ruined. Just little tips. I think I'm going to start with the background and move to the foreground. We know that warm color comes forward and cool color goes back, recedes. So to create a sense of deeper space, we're going to use the cool color, the blues, to go back. And I'm going to start, I'm going to dip into my retarder. I'm going to pick up some ultramarine blue and some burnt umber. As you see, I have a nice dark, but I haven't used any black. Be careful, don't use too much retarder because it's going to thin it out too much, as I see I have done. I'm going to go grab a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to put a tiny bit of white into this paint, not to make it lighter, but to give it some body. The ultramarine blue tends to be transparent, and you don't really want it to be transparent at this point. Acrylic is a funny, interesting paint. It can be used almost like a watercolor, like watercolor paint if you thin it out enough with water, and that's not what we're doing here. Remember, it dries fast, so we're working fast. I like the 8x10 canvas because you really can do an all-at-once painting because it's small enough. I have the leather on the boot is almost as dark as the background, so this is a good example of having how we can have edges disappear. You see, I'm not using my palette knife to blend. I can get away with this more with acrylic than we can with oil, as long as we keep our brush moist and not let it dry. Let the paint dry onto the brush. Acrylic does dry fast, so work fast. A little bit of a highlight on that leather. We use white for highlights, but always we add a little bit of yellow, so it's not a stark white. White is cool and makes it like a hole in your painting. All right, I'm going to work on the background, the tabletop, using more yellow ochre. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the yellow ochre for the background tabletop, just to push it back a bit. If you have questions about this technique, we'll talk about this in conference. So when you're watching the video, just take notes of things that you would like to learn more about. If you're confused, just like you would do if we were in class, you'd be interrupting me. So interrupt me in conference. You may notice that I'm not painting like if I was painting a wall, you know, straight across. I'm varying my brush strokes. I'm not really trying to create any texture here, but I am going kind of stroke, 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 then picking up more paint, stroke, stroke, stroke. So the paint is a little thick. We don't want it to be so thin that it becomes see-through. Paint has a lovely feel to it. I read a book once about Impressionist painters and how each artist, if you look closely at the painting, up close, you would see each artist actually had a different way of stroking the paint onto the canvas, like a signature. This is the shadow. The shadow, I'm making the same color as the tabletop. It's just cooler. So it is yellow ochre still, but I've added some blue and a little bit of burnt umber. Identifying and matching color takes practice. It would be nice if you could take some time to just make color charts, mixing two colors together to see what you would get, then adding some white to it and some black to see how the color changes. Also, we need to do our best at matching values. That's how we show form. Right, this is closer to the light. The light is coming onto the boot from the left side, so there's going to be more light on this side. So light means adding more yellow. Painting wet into wet, Alla Prima all at once, truly lends itself to more expressive, more impressionist work. You can always go back and add detail, even at a second sitting if you wish. I need more yellow. Okay. We bought larger tubes for this class because we go through a lot of paint. So I'm going to need a few more hours to complete this, but I have one finished here that was drawn a little bit smaller and one almost finished here. I would completely block in every area of the boot, then go back in and check my highlights and my shadows, and then put in the detail using a pointed brush. And you decide how much detail you want to add. You don't need to put every little detail in. Just enough hints, up to your own aesthetic, actually. Some of you may really like doing detail work, so you can't wait to get to the end so you can do detail work. Others may decide, I like it just the way it is. And though we said this was all at once, in one sitting, you may come back to it a second time to add those details. Remember, you're going to be doing 3 wet into wet paintings. So we can discuss in conference what your subject matter might be. Flowers would be interesting. A plant would be interesting. So enjoy week 1.